respondentia, insurance, bottomry, all these, how these complex relationships were operating and how this complex system was in operation during the medieval period. It would be the most common of the entire group of the commercial practices is the hundika. You all must have heard about the hundi. Even the term hundi is in operation till now. What was its connotation during the medieval period and how it operated over under various layers of complexities we are going to discuss. It would be, it's a great pleasure that we have with us Professor A.R. Khan, who has worked on economic history of medieval India. And Professor Khan, could you just detail out how the hundika or bills of exchange were in operation during the medieval period? What were the hundis, how it were being worked, how it were being exchanged, and what was its importance in the entire commercial network of medieval India? Professor Khan, please.
Thank you, Dr. Abha. Friends, as Dr. Abha said, when we discuss medieval India, as you must have already read in your course, that medieval India is a period where a large amount of commercial and economic activities were taking place. There were various reasons for this increase in the commercial activities. We have already discussed those in our material and all. You must have read about them. How cash transaction has increased. As Dr. Abha said, monetization was introduced, and it was penetrating every aspect of commercial activity. In such a situation, when there was large commercial activities through cash money or liquid money as we call it was taking place, then the question and the problem was this money needed to be carried everywhere. Whenever merchants were moving for any business transaction with any buying or selling and all sorts of even state when it is realizing revenue, even when state is transferring large amounts of money from states, different parts of the empire to the capital or headquarters of the empire, which was whether it was at Agra or Delhi or any other place, wherever the empire's army was moving or various governors were stationed. So in all these transactions, large amounts of cash were to be transacted. Now there were a lot of problems with that, and the first obvious problem was how to carry metallic currency, that is mainly silver rupee, which was mainly used in day-to-day transactions, or gold coins or copper coins. All sorts of metallic currency was in use. Therefore it was difficult to carry heavy weights of this currency from one place to another, and at times to hundreds of miles from one place to another. So that was a simple question of logistics. Second problem being faced was to secure that money. There was always fear of robbers, dacoits and plunderers who may try to snatch that money, who will try to loot this money if it is being taken from one part to another, or lost due to any of the calamities, floods or all sorts of situations. There was always a fear of losing that money. In such a situation, a new method of transaction evolved, and this was through a note on paper. Thereby the transaction was carried, as we have today the practice of drafts being transferred from one place to another, and this was called, through this piece of paper through which this transaction was taking place, was termed as hundika or hundi, or what we in English refer to bills of exchange. तो जैसे कि मैंने आपको बताया कि उस समय मध्यकाल में जिस तरह से ज्यादा बिजनेस एक्टिविटी बढ़ रही थी, उससे मुद्रा का प्रयोग भी लगातार बढ़ता जा रहा था, और ये मुद्रा या तो चांदी के या सोने के सिक्कों के रूप में थी, और बड़े बड़े बिजनेस डील करने में डिफरेंट पार्ट्स में अंपायर के पैसा भेजने के लिए इस तरह के कैश मनी को भेजने में प्रॉब्लम्स आती थी। दूसरी प्रॉब्लम ये थी कि इसके लुट जाने का डर होता था रास्ते में, या नष्ट हो जाने का डर होता था किसी न किसी प्राकृतिक आपदाओं की वजह से या अन्य समस्याओं की वजह से। तो इसलिए ये एक बहुत डिफिकल्ट काम था, और बिजनेस तो बढ़ता ही जा रहा है। उन परिस्थितियों में ये एक तरीका निकाला गया जिसमें एक कागज पे इस तरह से पैसे का पेमेंट करने का ब्यौरा देते हुए एक कागज के हुंडी के द्वारा एक स्थान से दूसरे स्थान ज्यादा मुद्रा को ट्रांसफर किया जा सकता था। इस बिजनेस प्रैक्टिस को, इस तरह के उसको हुंडी व्यवस्था कहते थे। अंग्रेजी में इसको बिल्स ऑफ एक्सचेंज भी कहते थे, और इसके द्वारा मनी को एक स्थान से दूसरे स्थान ट्रांसफर किया जाता था। तो ये कैसे किया जाता था, इसके बारे में ब्रीफ में हम आपको बताएंगे। क्या होता था कि अगर किसी को, व्यापारी को एक स्थान से, मान लीजिए आगरा से पटना जाना है कुछ सामान खरीदने के लिए, या ढाका जाना है पटना से, या सूरत जाना है कहीं पर कोई सामान खरीदने, तो उसके लिए अब वो आगरा से अगर मर्चेंट चलेगा तो वो रुपए अपने साथ लेके नहीं जाना चाहता, इसलिए वो क्या करेगा, दैट दिस ट्रेडर विल अप्रोच वन ऑफ द सर्राफ्स और ए बिग मर्चेंट in Agra and give him the money which he intended to carry. Say for example, if he wanted to carry 10,000 rupees, these 10,000 rupees that merchant or trader will pay to a saraf in Agra, and that saraf in Agra will give a paper stating three things basically, that how much amount is being to be paid through that paper. Number two, where it is encashable. Generally the name of place was also mentioned, that whether it is hundi was drawn or Dhaka or Surat or Patna, that will be mentioned on that. And third point mentioned on the hundi was generally the period for which this was valid. After a month, 2 months, or by this and this date, this person can produce. Now that person is not carrying 10,000 rupees, that person is carrying only a piece of paper where the details are written, and when this merchant reaches Dhaka and does their all business transactions, and when the time for payment comes, then he will go to a designated person in Dhaka and present this piece of paper, and that saraf in Dhaka will pay 10,000 rupees in cash, through which merchant can make payments. So in simple terms, what was it? That the money was being transferred instead of liquid cash in the form of a piece of paper, through which this person can encash this piece of paper for cash money at any place. So now it has made things so much simpler, that a person will take a hundi instead of a cash money with them, and it will be encashed at a place. And what will the saraf gain out of this? Saraf will charge a certain percentage, a certain commission on that, and this commission will depend on the amount of money being transferred. It will depend on the duration for which money would be with the merchant saraf, and third thing would be that how much is the distance of the place where it is to be presented, and depending on that the rate of commission. We will discuss the range of commissions. Depending on these things, these commissions were decided.
It is interesting, Professor Khan, that when you are mentioning that when what is actually hundi and how when it is being shown. So gradually over the period, we find that the complexities and more complex systems were developed particularly during the 17th century, as you were mentioning that as initially largely the darshani hundi, as a person is taking the hundi and reaching the destination, once that person reaches the destination, that person would be able to encash. Normally we used to call it a darshani hundi, but during the 17th century and later phase, this complexities were increasing more and more, in the sense that Ant in Gujarat, the Ant system was developing, and it's the Kacha and Pakka Ant. Ant means even to reduce the flow of cash, instead of using more and more cash, what they did in Ant was that the person whose name the hundi was written, who was supposed to encash that, instead of encashing that, what they used to do, another account was opened in that particular person's name, and there was no cash transaction took place, but the profit was further hundis, that credit transfer. So in that Kacha and Pakka Ant, Kacha and Pakka Ant, they have developed depending on if the coin paid was the current coin, then they paid that with the current rate, so they call it a Pakki hundi and Pakka Ant, and if it was the older coin that was used, so they used to call it Kacha Ant. So this system of Ant that developed further during the 17th century, that suggests even more complexity in the hundi.
Actually, what Dr. Abha Singh said is very correct, that metallic currency's value was in terms of its weight, and the weight was slightly changing with the new coinage coming, and a coinage being in use for long times will have a reduction in weight because of the constant use, and therefore the difference was also adjusted through that, so that when it's being encashed in terms of money, then it will have a different value, and when this hundi is deposited at another place, and through which, if they want, a smaller hundis can be issued afresh for different transactions. So how prevalent this practice is proved by that the prevalence of hundi was not limited to only some business transaction. Actually, it was so highly prevalent in that time that in due course this hundi itself became an instrument of exchange. Now there was no need to encash the hundi. You can transfer that hundi, so that now it becomes transferable instrument also, that you have got a hundi issued, then you can transfer it. You can pay hundi directly to the trader from which you buy the things, instead of encashing and then giving and again losing money at every stage. So therefore it will be encashed only once, then you pay through that. Even it was so prevalent and so much in use that even state is using mechanism of hundi for transferring its own money. That was the height of it. That the Mughal Empire or Delhi Sultan, who were all powerful, who had their armies to protect their money if they were moving, but still they didn't want to take any chances. Even state had decided that they will transfer their land revenue. Say for example, in Patna, land revenue is collected 2 lakh rupees, and that revenue is to be sent to the royal treasury in Agra during Mughal period, or during Sultans to Delhi. Then the money will be given to a trader or a saraf in Patna, and that saraf will issue a hundi. That hundi will be brought to Agra or Delhi, wherever it is destination is mentioned, and there it can be encashed. So state was using a large scale hundis for transferring their own money. Even when army is operating somewhere and additional money is to be sent to the army, that money will be sent through hundi, and that hundi, wherever the army at that time is stationed, and there it will be encashed for buying provisions or using for armed forces use. even the nobles were transferring their own wealth through that. For example, if a governor is transferred, say from Dhaka to Surat, then that governor, their own personal money they will not carry with them. Even if they have soldiers with them, they will just take it in the form of a hundi to their new place of posting, or wherever their family is residing. If they have to transfer, they will transfer it through hundi. And we have nobles and Mughals armies or larger Amir transferring amount of 1 lakh, 2 lakh, 3 lakh rupees during those period of time, which was a huge sum, through these hundis. So it was that much prevalent. Now I'll take just 2 more points about the commission rate and how was this network operating, how this network used to work. You wanted to add something?
No, you please carry on.
As far as commission is concerned, as I said earlier, the commission was charged by the saraf who will draw this hundi to another place. And same way, when it is encashed, a little commission is deducted at that end also. This commission depended on deferred. It was not fixed. It was different for different places. The biggest factor for this change was regular fluctuation depending on the flow of money at a particular place. As we see in the market these days, dollar's price is going up and down depending on how much currency is coming, how much is available in the market. If there are more dollars available, then naturally dollar versus money goes down. Something of this sort was happening. Say, for example, if in Agra there is a shortage of cash, more hundis have been encashed, then the rate will change. And if there is more money available in cash form, then you can draw hundi at different rate. So this flow of cash at a particular place will also fluctuate the commission rate. Otherwise, commission fluctuated between 1.5% and went up to even 7% or 8%.
Political instability.
Yes, that was also another reason when there is less of a risk or more of a risk. If there is a political instability, when there is a fear that there will be law and order problem and all that, and people might lose money and all, then the rate will go higher.
Even the route which they are taking, depending on the route.
If they are going by a route, so there were various factors which were determining that. If the route is very dangerous, if there is a fear of it being plundered, or person carrying may be killed and all security problems and all were there, then the rates will change. So therefore from Jabalpur, sir. Yeah, please. Jabalpur, please ask the question. Namaskar.
Hello.
Yes.
सर अभी आप बता रहे थे कि हुंडी दैनिक लेन देन पे और व्यापारी भी और शासक भी सभी लोग यूज करते थे.
जी.
तो मैं ये जानना चाह रहा हूँ, क्या ये इसका कोई प्रारूप होता था क्या, इसका एक स्टैंडर्ड फॉर्मेट जिसको सभी लोग यूज करते थे, या फिर कभी इसमें कोई अगर मुकर जाए देने से तो उस स्थिति में क्या किया जा सकता था, या क्या इसके प्रोविजंस थे? जी, ये सब मैं जानना चाहता हूं.
हाँ जरूर. मैं नेक्स्ट मेरा पॉइंट वही था कि ये पूरा मैकेनिज्म किस तरह से ऑपरेट करता था. क्या इनका कोई नेटवर्क था? ये गारंटी कैसे होती थी कि मैंने 10,000 रुपया दिया, क्या ये गारंटी अब कैसे है कि मुझे पटना में ये 10,000 ही मिल जाएगा, और कौन देगा, और अगर वो नहीं देगा तो मैं क्या कर लूंगा? ये जो पूरा हुंडी का ऑपरेशन था, जैसे मैंने बताया आपको कि एक कॉम्प्लेक्स ऑपरेशन के थ्रू था, तो ये नेटवर्क बना हुआ था. वो नेटवर्क किस तरह का था? जो सारे बड़े ट्रेडिंग सेंटर्स हुआ करते थे, वहां पे एजेंट्स इनके होते थे, या तो कई बार ये फैमिलीज में ऑपरेट होता था. एक भाई आगरा में है, एक पटना में है, एक ढाका में है, एक सूरत में है, एक चाचा वहां पे है, एक और रिलेटिव कोई कजिन वहां पे है, जिनका एक नेटवर्क रहता था और वो उनके नाम हुंडी ड्रा करते थे. आगरे वाले ने अपने जो एजेंट है, या तो उसका फैमिली मेंबर है या उसका कोई एसोसिएट है, कोई दूसरा साहूकार है वहां पे, सर्राफ है, उसके नाम वो हुंडी इशू करते थे. तो अगर उसको कैश में एनकैश करना है तो वहीं पे होगी, उसी शॉप में या उसी जगह पे. तो इस तरह से क्या था कि एक नेटवर्क पूरा बन गया था. ब्रांचेज एक तरह की हो गई थी, जिसको आज हम कहते हैं कि डिफरेंट बैंक्स की जैसे ब्रांचेज ऑपरेट करती हैं. और कई बार क्या होता था कि अगर उनका अपना कोई नहीं होता था तो उनकी जो मार्केट में वैल्यू होती थी, साख होती थी एज ए ट्रेडर और एज ए सर्राफ, उसके बेसिस पे कोई दूसरा उसको खरीद सकता था। जैसे आज आप किसान पत्र या उसमें ट्रेडिंग करते हैं।
I would like to add on कि during late 17th century 1695 there was a Persian writer Sujan Rai Bhandari who was writing about, he basically was writing about in Punjab, but he says that these sarrafs had so much credibility, the sak which Professor Khan is referring to, that even a stranger can deposit his money and can get it back whenever or can it get it back on demand. So the sak was very important. So
okay, please. Jabalpur, we'll again continue your queries. One part is left. Meanwhile, we can take Visakhapatnam also. Yes.
I don't think there is any question. I think they just want.
There is a person here from Visakhapatnam. Yes, please come with your question. हाँ बिल्कुल वही बात हम कह रहे हैं, मुद्रा विनिमय हाँ नहीं, मुद्रा विनिमय प्रणाली तो बहुत समय से थी भारतवर्ष में। इवन हमें सिक्के तो प्राचीनतम मौर्य काल से भी पहले के मिलते हैं, तो मुद्रा विनिमय तो था। लेकिन मध्यकाल में जैसा हमने कहा कि मुद्रा का प्रयोग बहुत अधिक बढ़ गया था और बार्टर कम होता जा रहा था। तो मुद्रा का बार्टर जो है सिर्फ लोकल लेवल पे, विलेज लेवल पे कुछ चीजों के लिए यूज होता था, बाकी सारे ही बिजनेस ट्रांजैक्शन में मुद्रा विनिमय ही था। तो इस मुद्रा विनिमय के बढ़ने की वजह से ही ये समस्या आ रही थी कि कैसे ज्यादा से ज्यादा मुद्रा के यूज होने में मुद्रा को बिना किसी दिक्कत के एक जगह से दूसरी जगह ट्रांसफर किया जाए। अब एक पॉइंट अभी ये जो जबलपुर ने रखा था वो भी इस सिलसिले में महत्वपूर्ण है कि क्या करते थे कि अगर कोई फेल हो जाएगा, अगर कोई भी उसको पेमेंट करने से इनकार कर देगा या फेल हो जाएगा, तब फिर वो आदमी कोई भी बिजनेस मार्केट में नहीं कर सकता। उनको इन्फोर्स करने का पहला तरीका, फर्स्ट स्टेज ये थी कि ये सराफों के और मर्चेंट्स और ट्रेडर्स के अपने गिल्ड होते थे, अपने एसोसिएशंस एक तरह की थी जो पूरे इनके नियमों को बनाते थे। तो जैसा कि आपने फॉर्मेट का पूछा था, फॉर्मेट बिल्कुल एक डेफिनेट था, उसमें अमाउंट होना है, किस प्लेस में होना है, किस मुद्दत तक होना है और क्या कमीशन है, इन सब का मेंशन होता था।
कब इशू हुई है और कहां पर
और कहां इशू हुई है और कहां तक इसको करना है। तो अगर किसी ने भी मना किया तब फिर वो आदमी बिजनेस नहीं कर सकता। कई बार ऐसा होता था कि कोई फर्म दिवालिया हो जाती थी, उसका भी पूरा प्रोसीजर था। जो आप सोचते हैं बैंकरप्ट जिसे आज कहते हैं, उसे दिवालिया कहा जाता था और उसका बड़े इंटरेस्टिंग रेफरेंसेस मिलते हैं मध्यकाल में कि जब कोई आदमी मार्केट में उसकी वैल्यू खत्म हो चुकी, वो ट्रांजैक्शन नहीं कर पा रहा है, किसी का कर्जदारों का पैसा या लोगों ने जिन्होंने हिंडी या जमा किया था वो नहीं दे पा रहा है, तब वो अपने घर के सामने एक दिया जला के रखता था। प्रोबेबली उसी से दिवाला शब्द निकला और वो दिया जला के बैठ जाता था और उसका मतलब ये होता था कि नाउ दिस पर्सन हैज नो वैल्यू इन द मार्केट, दैट मीन्स दैट पर्सन वाज रूइंड एंड इफ दे हैड एनी एसेट्स then state will recover that money on the complaint of the person. So at the first stage, merchants and traders own groups or associations will enforce the rules, and in the second stage, if that is not possible, then state will intervene. State can even punish them, as is happening these days, that the state has a role. So we'll come to the role of the state in our second part, how much role state was playing in the overall commercial transactions or business and trading activities. So that was about India. Yeah, please, Visakhapatnam. Yeah, come with your question. That's all. Yeah.
क्या एक जगह की मुद्रा दूसरे राज्य में एक राज्य की मुद्रा दूसरे राज्य में एक्सेप्टेबल थी?
हाँ बिल्कुल थी, क्योंकि जैसा मैंने आपको बताया कि मुद्रा जो थी मेटालिक करेंसी थी। हाँ, तो मेटालिक करेंसी में जो उस मेटल का मार्केट रेट था उसके बेसिस पे उसकी वैल्यू डिसाइड होती थी। अगर सिल्वर का रेट जो है और सिल्वर रुपी में जितना वेट हुआ जो कॉइन किया गया वो मुद्रा दूसरी जगह इनकैश हो जाएगी, उसको उतने ही पैसा मिल जाएगा जो चांदी की कीमत होगी। इसी तरह से स्वर्ण मुद्रा का था। ये टोकन करेंसी नहीं थी कि जिसकी वैल्यू सिर्फ आज के जमाने में जैसे है कि पेपर पे डिक्लेयर्ड वैल्यू है और जो स्टेट गारंटी करती है। उस समय भी मुद्रा को बनाने का राइट केवल स्टेट का था। जो मिंट जिसको हम कहते हैं, जो टकसाल, जो सिक्के ढालने की जगह थी, वो स्टेट ऑपरेट करती थी, लेकिन कोई भी व्यक्ति अपना सोना या चांदी ले जाके उस टकसाल में सिक्के बनवा सकता था। ये यूनिफॉर्मिटी के लिए रखा गया था सिस्टम, ताकि स्टेट की टकसाल में जो निर्धारित वजन है उसी का 1 रुपए का सिक्का बनाया जाएगा और जब वो बेचा जाएगा तब वो सिक्के का उस ढंग से पेमेंट किया जाएगा। इसका ये भी सिस्टम था कि अगर 10 साल पुराना सिक्का है तो उस पर कितना मार्जिन काटा जाएगा वो भी तय होता था। अगर 20 साल पुराना है तो उसके यूसेज से जो उसका वेट कम हुआ उसका वो काट लिया जाएगा।
एक्चुअल वैल्यू और फेस वैल्यू सेम थी,
लगभग सेम थी। तो इसलिए किसी भी राज्य में कोई भी मुद्रा चलने में ये दिक्कत नहीं थी, क्योंकि जो उसकी एक्चुअल वैल्यू है मुद्रा की, वही उसकी मेटल की वैल्यू है, गोल्ड की या सिल्वर की, और उसी एक्सचेंज रेट से चलता था। Dr. Abha Singh, I think we are taking too long on one aspect only, hundis. I think we should move and talk about something usury, how the money was transacted and how interest was being charged for business purposes. That Dr. Abha Singh will elaborate.
Thank you, Professor Khan, and it's an interesting discussion, and we are grateful that the students are on the other side and they are asking the question. We would be too glad to answer their questions. So the another important aspect related to business practices was usury. Actually, interesting, the problem with medieval period and prior to the pre-medieval period, early medieval period, another is that there were certain practices that were in operation since very long time, but the historical evidences to that we come to, for that we have to wait very, very late period. For example, usury. We know that the usury was in practice as early as 6th century BC, but
usury ko thoda sa Dr. Singh explain kar
usury means
generally familiar with interest and not usury only.
Money, in a term we can call it a money lending. On money is being lended or given on loan, and on which the interest rate is being charged. To sum up in a brief, we can say that that was usury. So the first recorded evidence of usury comes as late as 13th century. There is an interesting document in 13th century work, Lekha Paddhati, that is very, very important source if we want to study business practices. It is full of, Professor Khan was discussing about Hundika. In the 13th century source, there are number of hundis. The word is not used hundi, it's the work is in Sanskrit, so the word used there is Vyavhar Patra. So number of these hundi deeds are, so that it was a set pattern, as Professor Khan was saying. Coming to this, that we get very, very few references. So first reference to it we get in the 13th century in Lekha Paddhati. This is the document from Gujarat. Another important, before we go further, another important aspect related to business practices is that the works, there were the personnel who were involved, engaged in these business practices, they were playing many faceted role. For example, the merchants. Merchants were not simply the traders who were dealing in trade and commerce only, but they were the moneylender merchants. They were involved with usury, and this reference to Dhanik, Vyavhara and Shreshti we get as early as in Lekha Paddhati. Similar type of moneylender merchants we get in the 14th century, Tarikh-e-Firoz Shahi, written by Barni. He refers to the Multanis and Sah merchants were lending money, giving money on loan to the nobles. to fulfill their needs. Similarly, again in the 14th century, we get regular references of this moneylender merchant issuing the salary drafts, that's cubs, to the money to the soldiers. It's 14th century is full of issue of these cubs, and these were issued by the moneylender merchants. So the important aspect that I was emphasizing, that usury, it's not merchants were involved in a big way in these money lending activities. There is another very important group about which Professor Khan was speaking, that Sarraf. We will be taking in detail what was the role Sarraf were playing in the medieval economy, one of the most crucial and important personnel that we would be discussing in the second session. But this was also an important person involved in money lending activities. Another aspect as far as related to usury and money lending was that as far as the trade was concerned, most of the trade was based during the medieval period on borrowed capital. It is a part of the money was the merchant was using his own money, but more than half of the money they were borrowing on loans for their commercial practices, for their trade. I can give just one interesting example. We get very interesting information on business practices and trading activities during the medieval period, particularly 16th, 17th century. There is a work written by Banarsi Dasi himself, was a big merchant, jeweler, sarraf. He was a big trader and merchant during the medieval period. 16th, 17th century, he belonged to Jaunpur. He has written a beautiful, very interesting, exhaustive piece on these practices, throwing light on these commercial and trading practices in his famous work Ardh Kathanak. He was mentioning about himself. He was a jeweler merchant. He mentions that how when he started his business, only half of the money was of his and his family members, but rest he borrowed on loan. So it's a large usury. When I was saying usury, how important usury was, it was completely embedded, completely trade was largely dependent on this borrowed capital. Now when we say that how the rate of interest in usury was decided upon, generally it was dependent on three important aspects. One, the SAK, the credit, as Professor Khan was also speaking about the SAK, that the credit of the person who is going to take loan is very, very important.
Say for example, if a governor is
asking, so that SAK is there, the credit is there. Then the need of the person, whether it's the emergency for him, definitely the interest rate will go up. If it's not much, then interest rate might not be all that. So need of the person, then the capacity of that person to pay off, because that ensures whether the money lender who is giving the money, whether going to get back that money or not. So these three factors were very, very important. And in the case of Bengal, Tapan Rai Chaudhary mentions that the interest rate in certain cases went as high as 150%. But this is a very, very rare example, but it was very high, charged at least once. But normal rate of interest, we find that ranges during the medieval period, particularly 16th, 17th century. We get stray references but definite references. It ranged from 6% to 12%. largely.
And Dr. Abha, we get different references also, say in case of East India Company,
Yes.
who had their operations in a
themselves-
large number of places. So they will always identify which place is providing
the
less amount, and then they will ask their branch. Say Surat people will ask in Dhaka, if the rates are going low, ki you buy money at Dhaka, you take money on loan in Dhaka and transfer this money here so that we can get in less amount.
Yes,
So all
because what Professor Khan is saying, this fluctuating rate was very important, because in 1679 we get a reference about the Qasim Bazar in Bengal. The rate of interest was 15%, and the same period, the reference we get for Agra, it was just 8%. So definitely East India Company would have been too pleased to take money on loan from at Agra, not at Qasim Bazar. And particularly where the pressure was more, at Coromandel the interest rate was very high. It goes up to 16%, and in Maharashtra particularly the interest rate were very high, reported very high, 37.5 to 60%.
In a particular period.
In the particular, because we get the stray references, but largely the interest rate varied from 9% to 36%. This was a normal range, but at times it goes up to 60%. Even it is very interesting, you will find that even Takavi that the state was paying, whether through money lender or the Bohra or Mahajan was paying the Takavi or whatever, it is the state was charging 9% interest. It was, Takavis were not free. They were in Rajasthan. We get definite references that the Takavis were the loans given to the peasants for agricultural operations. So these Takavis were not interest free. Peasants were supposed to pay the interest, very high rate of interest.
What is also more significant about these medieval lending systems is that interest rate is generally expressed in terms of the month and all,
that
not annual and all,
important.
because it was generally short term.
That is very important. And the another important aspect related to this is, since we are finding that the range is so wide, 9 to this, so this also shows that as far as the financial market was concerned, it was not integrated that way very much. So money lending, it was. Then another important aspect related to usury was that how Professor Irfan Habib argues that it was money lending usury was related or increased, this practice increased mainly because of the state, because the state asked and demanded in cash, revenue demand in cash. So this is very important aspect related to usury, but there are other two important aspects related to business practices is the partnership and insurance. So if Dr. Khan, Professor Khan, you could speak little bit on, because we are running short of time, so insurance we can take little later, but partnership if you can speak little bit on.
Yeah, we whatever aspects we are not able to take, luckily we have a second session immediately after this at 6 o'clock, and we will take up there. Partnership was another business practice which was quite prevalent during the medieval period. It is called Sanjha Vyapar, or a partnership, which is quite prevalent. What are the areas in which this partnership was operating? It was not only for undertaking a business, where a certain individuals will pool money and then with the joint capital they will do business. These sorts of partnerships were established in the case of the merchants, in the case of the brokers, in the case of other business activities. Even partnerships were established for short while, for a single journey, or for one ship being bought and sent for business, or one single trip, a ship is, commodities are bought and are sent through ship to another destination, and only for that duration partnership is worked out. And once that is over, the partnership is over, and profits are distributed in terms of the money pooled. So there were different types of partnerships. I am just rushing it, and these partnerships dependent on the nature of trade being undertaken. Sometimes partnerships were in perpetuity, that 2 or 3 people are running a joint firm or a partnership firm for a number of years, and they are doing all sorts of business. Sometimes they are a specific trade, sometimes they are for a specific shipping event, or sometimes just for a particular season. Say there is a season of indigo or cotton, and then they are buying jointly, and after that season is over, the partnership gets dissolved. There were written rules for such partnerships, and partnership will depend on whatever the rules are drawn. And these partnerships were recognized by the merchant groups and enforced by them as well as by the state. Both will honor them, respect them, and if there were any disputes, same mechanism as in the case of we said about the usury of bills of exchange, that the mechanism of resolving any disputes in partnerships were through the merchants organizations or the state, whatever the case.
Do you think that then can we call that it's a joint, it was some sort of joint stock companies were in operation during the 17th century?
We can't say, not till we have these European companies entering the market. They are a long-term shareholdings which a person's transferring their shares in any venture and all. So that sort of stage it has not reached among the Indian merchants and groups. It was partnerships in the simple terms, not something of a joint stock. I think we are running out of time for this session. We'll continue at 6 o'clock, and we'll continue our business personnel or commercial personnel discussion, and whatever is left from this session, especially insurance and such other practices, we'll take first that in brief. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.